expanding capacity for refining and the pricing mechanism is not in tune with the market fundamentals, what are the consequences? Domestic refining in and on itself does not guarantee efficiency, affordability, and energy security. And we could see it in our face. But the good thing right now is that for the first time in the history of Nigeria, we've come to recognize the correlation between crude oil prices and productive price. This is the first time. In the past, the price of crude oil could be going up and the price of petroleum product will remain stable. By the way, there's not been any riot. So in that, PIA is actually working. Because for the first time, we've accepted to live with the market fundamentals. The only thing we are waiting for is when the price of oil will collapse. And it will. What did I say? It will, in your eyes. And we are waiting for what the price of product will be. My friend, this roundtable brings together perspectives from regulators, operators, investors, and somebody you cannot define where it belongs, which is me. The academia is all about what ought to be, not what is. Because it's only when you know what ought to be that you can understand what is. For us in the academia, what ought to be is where we start. Well, let me begin with my friend in Netherlands. Thank you again, my cheerleader, for joining us. I've just narrated what ought to be. Refining capacity is expanding. And a lot of people think that because we have crude oil, petroleum products must be cheap. Ogachike, give me your 2 to 3 minutes preamble. Just realize that we have limited time.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. And I'll try and do this as quickly as I can. So you've covered, some of the things that we expected to happen over the course of time. And I say this starting from when, for example, as CEO of Walter Smith Petroman, we delivered the first 5,000 barrels of oil per day modular refinery in Nigeria. At that time, the focus was just about breaking even because, of course, PMS was subsidized. And when you did the economics or you did the financial model, you would realize that you would be losing money on certain products, the ones that are subsidized. And that the product prices were not, market driven. And we anticipated that the only strategic reasoning for doing that modular refinery was because of the challenges that were happening on the Trans-Niger pipeline. Over the course of almost 6 years from when that modular refinery was commissioned, the Dangote refinery has come in, and we've started to see a change in the landscape with some of the policy positions that the federal government has taken, especially removing the subsidy, which was a scandalous subsidy. Now, what we are seeing now is, to a large extent, a market-driven pricing of petroleum products. And you can see that with this US, Iran, Israel crisis, the price of crude has gone up, and consequently the price of petroleum products has gone up. And as you very rightly said, we are looking forward to making sure that those market corrections that happen when the price of crude oil goes down will be evident to everybody. And that position that domestic refining has taken in Nigeria and in the region as well is very critical for the long-term sustainability of the midstream and downstream business. So I'll stop there because there are so many other things you can add to that position. But we like the fact that that transition has happened, driven partly by the PIA and the liberalization of the midstream and downstream sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Certainly, the restructuring is ongoing. We must sustain it. Chief Regulator, thank you for respecting your ACE. And what I would like you to look at is this restructuring sustainable under the political system? And what do you think is the role of the regulator to sustain this direction that PIA wants us to go? And what are the limitations? Just give me, yes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, moderator. So, first of all, I think it's important we recall that what we have today is actually recycled to the beginning. This was basically around where we were at the very beginning of the downstream industry in Nigeria. So we had a private refinery that was owned by Shell. And then we had Nigeria depending on products refined locally for our subsistence. We had pipelines that were working, and so we now went the full cycle, kind of. So we moved from that point to the point where local refining capacity broke down, the pipelines went down, we were 100% dependent on imports, and we have now done full cycle and come back to where we were in the beginning, which was the ideal stage, which was where we were actually supposed to be. That was why we started from there in the first place. So yes, it is sustainable. It is sustainable because it has happened, and that has been the trend and the pattern in so many other countries of the world, and ours really shouldn't be an exception. It is sustainable if we are able to ensure that we identify there are values in it, sir. And as long as you are able to identify these are the values you need to key into and you need to work on so that you can derive maximum benefits. For instance, values around value retention. So you have your crude oil, you have your raw materials, you are able to refine them, create more value, enhance capacity, develop in-house capacity, and all of that. So yes, it is sustainable. There's a lot of responsibilities for everyone. As I will speak as a regulator, we have a responsibility to ensure that the prices remain as competitive as they should be. And I disagree with those who suggest that you cannot have a competitive pricing in the kind of environment we have today. It's not necessarily so, because that is why you have the regulator. And the PIA is very clear on what the regulator needs to do. The fact that you have only one active PMS refining facility in Nigeria today does not stop the regulator from doing its work in terms of ensuring that PMS prices at any point in time are not exploitative. So the regulation, liberalization, is not a substitute for, is not another word for exploitation, no. So there are rules in place, and you were one of those who put, the PI in place. And so there are provisions that as long as the regulator is able to be guided to ensure that it does what it needs to do, I think we can tackle that problem until we get to a point as a country where we now have multiple sourcing. When I say multiple sourcing, in terms of refining capacity, and I think we are on that path. We have quite a number of refining projects that are ongoing. So it's sustainable. It's something that we have seen so much value in, and we've had it mentioned here today. Nigeria is where we are today in terms of supply stability. I'm not talking of pricing now. I'm talking of supply stability, because in so many countries in the world you have issues around rationing now. But because of the fact that we have local capacity, yes, we have some level of supply stability. Okay, the pricing has been taking all the hits, and those are the areas that we need to rise up to the challenge. It's a global challenge, actually.
Thank you very much. The United States produces the highest production per day in terms of crude oil. The United States has significant amount of refineries, yet the price of petroleum products are going up. So it's normal. Again, there's no debate on it. We have a dominant firm in the refining capacity. We're going to talk about that. Now let me invite Joe, because there has been a debate as to whether the regulator should continue or not to issue licenses. And then within the context of contestable market philosophy towards a competitive market, what's the difference between issuing licenses and importing products? And please give us overview of the current dynamics.
Okay, I think I will start by saying that generally the market is in transition.
Yes.
Okay, we are moving from a price-regulated, state-led downstream to one that is market-led and price-deregulated. Now, that means there will be some pain. Old habits die hard, right? So, and I will start from there to say, okay, you talked about contest, and I'll go back because it's important that we get the context. The PIA and the National Petroleum Policy 2017 identified refining. It's not just it's actually refining for export.
Yes.
Okay, that's the target. So Nigeria aspires to be a refining hub. What that means is that we'll refine enough for domestic use and for export. And I'm happy that the Dangote refinery came on board. It's a blessing to think about the subsidy is gone comment without domestic refining at some point. That would have been a disaster. So we basically dodged the bullet. Alhaji helped us out. However, the thing to note is that the market, because it's in transition, there's been a lot of hiccups, and import is, the debate around import and tariffs and all that is part of it. My take is that if the public policy objective is the maximization of the welfare of the consumer, the man at the pump, then we must necessarily go back and say what gives him the maximum value. That is the fair pricing, okay? The consumer must get fair pricing. If the consumer must get fair pricing, the only way to achieve that is not the regulator fixing that price, it is competition, right? So if it is competition that guarantees fair pricing for me when I go to buy fuel at the pump, then we must have competition in the near term, in the medium term, and in the long term. So how do we achieve it, given that we only have one domestic refinery? That's where the issue...
We have a dominant refiner.
Well, right now, we only have one PMS refinery in the country. So what that means is that we must then, to have competition in this market, you must allow imports in the near term. So until such a time you have multiple players, and then you reduce the dominance, the market dominance of players to a level where price competition kicks in, you need to allow imports. And I must say this, one of the reasons I hold that view is that, remember, the policy objective is that you become a refining hub. That means your domestic refineries have to be price competitive. They must export. If you create an enclave economy for them, they will not be able to achieve the efficiency levels that you need for them to export their products. That's one. The other point that I have serially made is that when you close the economy, in quote, to imports, you lose the ability to respond if anything goes wrong. So supply stabilization becomes a challenge, right? So if the plant, for instance, is going for turnaround, you're going to be stuck. So the other major advantage is that the domestic refineries need the price signals from imports. Because today, I was just coming in and I checked the Maiman board. There, if you go there, you will see the numbers, right? It shows you what the coastal and S-gantry is for Dangote, and it tells you what the landing cost equivalent for import is. That price signal is important. It's something that we need to have at all times. Otherwise, the domestic refineries will not, they will price their product the way they want. So for me, I think it's too early to shut down imports. I think we are still transitioning. We need to allow time for the market, for price discovery to happen, and for the market to stabilize.
Yes, I think I agree with you that no participant in the market should dictate to the regulator what the regulator should do or not do. The regulator, though, must always put into consideration the participant in the market. And I agree with you. It's one thing to have import license. It's another thing to import the quantity of petroleum. You can use that import license as a negotiating tool with a domestic refiner that if you don't price right, I'll go to the market. But then, Ogachike, come to rescue me. Because one thing is efficiency of production, but the petroleum value chain is integrated. What about infrastructure and logistics economics? Because it can refine all that we are needed. If the logistic is not there to move it, then there's going to be a challenge with pricing. So Chike is an investor enabler. So please, are midstream and downstream logistics bankable at the current tariff? So now we move away, we have refining capacity, but there must be a tariff to move it from the producer to the end users. Please, can you join us and look at infrastructure and logistics economics within the context of being competitive?
Thank you very much. If you observe, one of the things that Dangote did very early on after he commissioned this refinery was to try to strategically take control of the logistics of delivery of these petroleum products.
Yes.
Because it's a significant exposure in the country. Early experiences with the Walter Smith refinery were that the unions could easily shut you down. Nupeng and its arm, the Petroleum Tanker Drivers Association. And, I think I do recall that about a year into the operations of the refinery were shut down for possibly about 2 months because of union actions that had really nothing to do with the refinery itself. So I think Dangote came in and is trying to address that problem strategically to be able to deliver these products. Now, it comes with certain challenges. If Dangote takes control of the logistics of delivery of petroleum products, then it might not be a competitive landscape for others, other off-takers. Most modular refineries have off-takers ex-gate, so that means that the off-takers will come and take the products from the refinery gates, and they are therefore responsible for any logistics exposure in delivering the products. So because of that, they are able to compete in a market where there are not that many people that can provide that service, and at a tariff, which is of course transferred to the consumer. So there has to be a balance, between what Dangote is doing at a very large scale and, the ability to have other competitors come in and be able to make a profit from the tariff on the logistics part of the downstream industry. So the regulator has a role to play here as well. So again, I always come to the authority chief executive and his people, and I say to them that please keep your eye on what is going on in such a way that the logistics part, not just the refining part of this business, the logistics part of this business is not driven out by, I think, Prof, you normally call this an oligopoly. Okay? So it's critical that people understand the entire value chain of delivering petroleum products to the consumer. It doesn't stop at refining. That logistics aspect is very critical, and tariffing there has to be controlled in a sense, not to remove competition, yeah, but to make sure that competition is not driven out by monopolistic tendencies. That's what I would say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, the key driver in an oligopoly market structure along the value chain is the regulator. So I'm going to go to the regulator now. And by the way, let me make a quick disclaimer. It is one thing to craft a concept and craft it extremely well. It's another thing to draft the law and draft it in a way that it is implementable. I'm just responding to the regulator who mentioned something about someone being part of. No, the only thing we did was to craft. We did not, we conceptualized it. Some people crafted it. And then the president signed it. And something happened in the implementation process. Here now to the regulator. Am I being defensive? Say no. All right. Look at downstream, midstream regulator. The tendency is to pay a lot of attention to the end user and the refiner in between. So my question is, what is the policy roadmap for pipelines, depots, and multimodal transport, if we are going to be able to make sure that we balance what Joe is saying, maximization of those using petroleum product and maximization of value for those who invested in it? It's a big task.
Yes, sir. It is, and just looking at the presentation that I was prepared for this session, just to go to one or 2 points in that presentation. It talks about the supply ecosystem. So here we refer to domestic refining, which does not exist in a vacuum on its own. So you need a very healthy midstream bridge.
Yes.
And so that midstream bridge requires that you have functional pipelines, competitive distribution networks, well-capitalized markets, amongst others. And also, the infrastructure gap, which is very, very key, goes back to the midstream again, in terms of pipelines, storage depots, processing facilities, and all related facilities that will enable business in this segment. So it is all of these that create that climate. So we are very much aware, and that's why you see a lot of our efforts are geared towards not just, it doesn't end at refining, set a price, who is importing, who is not importing, the infrastructure that will actually take it down and facilitate development, which the downstream is all about, development at the end of the day. So we focus on that, and we have so many mechanisms to ensure that we improve in terms of facilities, in terms of their integrity, and then in terms of attracting investment for facilities. So for instance, the MDGIF, which is a part of the authority, is also focused on ensuring that we're able to de-risk some of these high-risk projects like pipelines, gas processing facilities, and all of that. And then we do carry out various PI provisions like economic viability and all of that to ensure that ideas that come into this midstream and downstream space are conceptualized in such a way that they see the end of the day. They move from conception to commissioning. So all of these are, yes, we pay attention to that. And then just to say a little bit about the subject matter we talked about, imports or no imports, it's also good to clear that the work of the regulator actually is to strike a balance. So the regulator is not going to come out and say, oh no, we don't, it is not, it is this or that. No, no, no. So our position is that we are in the market, in that space, to ensure that we find the right balance, and where we as authority feel that we need to import, we need to issue licenses or permits for imports, nothing stops us from doing it. Right. But it is based by well-informed systemic decision processing. And so that is how we on it.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Joe, I'm going to come back to you. Let's learn from the power sector, even as we look at the relationship between the capacity that we're expanding in terms of refining and getting it to the end user. You and I were on the same page always. Most often, we agree as to where we go. How we get there has been the challenge between you and myself. And luckily now I'm in charge, so I'm going to put you on the spot. Look at the transmission sector of Nigeria. Dominated by government. One company, and it is government. Can we learn from that? Should logistics infrastructure be treated as a regulated utility or a competitive segment?
That's a very good one, Prof. So let's pull back again. Logistics infrastructure are varied. Yes. So they should all be regulated for obvious reasons, but not price regulated. So except for monopoly infrastructure that needs to be price regulated, and that's where the authority will come in and set tariff methodology and all that. But for the other, whether it's trucking, whether it's tank farms, those should be regulated for safety and all of the other, but not price rate. They are commercial entities. There should be competition. Again, that is what maximizes consumer surplus, right? So my view is, let's go back. So if this, except for monopoly infrastructure, I expect to see competition across that logistic chain. And that is when I will get the best price for the product at home.
Thank you. Where's Richmond? How many more minutes do I have? All right. 10. All right. Chike, you are a financial guru, because I've seen you done a lot of things that people really thought. Nobody believed that Walter Smith will be able to have a reform. Now you put a modality there to expand it. Please, let's give your opinion. Has subsidy removal improved operational efficiency and investment planning in Nigeria? I don't know if you can hear me.
The simple answer is yes.
Good. What about the complex answer?
Like I said in the beginning, the subsidy was scandalous. Yeah? And it was taken advantage of by scrupulous marketers. Not all marketers are scrupulous, but scrupulous marketers, to the detriment of domestic refiners. Now, with the subsidy being removed and pricing being cost-reflective and market-driven, the margins are better. Yeah, so I've seen an improvement in the margins. And although, people say it's about PMS, please note that even the smaller refineries, the modular refineries, deliver naphtha. Yeah, and that naphtha's pricing was somewhat controlled by the subsidy on PMS. So with the removal of that subsidy, the margins are better with almost all the products. It's more cost-effective, basically, to invest in these refineries A lot of the pricing is getting more and more market driven, like we can see, because a significant part of the cost of sales is the cost of crude. And I'll come to that later on, because if the government wants to do something about delivering lower prices to the consumers, then it's not about subsidy. It's about making sure that the domestic refiners get crude and get crude in Naira, because a significant part of the costs are, basically paying back the dollar-denominated loans that were taken for the facilities. So we'll come back to that.
All right.
But with the removal of, the subsidy, things are much better. And you can see that operational efficiency has improved dramatically. I remember that when the subsidy was in place, and I say this not as a means of exposing anything, but this was the practice. You wouldn't sell the naphtha. You would probably want to reject the naphtha into the crude stream. And that was an operationally inefficient way to run a refinery. Yeah, but now that is no longer happening. And you can see that uptimes, operational efficiency have gone from as low as 60% to well over 90% for a lot of these modular refineries. So that's a more complex answer, but like I said, simply, yes, the subsidy has helped a lot.
Okay. Then I'm going to come back to you as I go around my final journey on this panel. What mechanisms can cushion consumers without reintroducing distortions? Listen, we must not deceive ourselves. There are pain as a result of this shock to the crude oil market. If you are going to do something for the consumers so that they don't take law into their own hands and send us backward again like they have done many years, many times, many years. I remember 2012. I remember 2007. I can tell you back and back. What can we do to educate the public that things will get better, but at the same time, cushion some of this glaring pain they are going through as a result of the inevitability of the price of petroleum products going up anytime the price of crude oil goes up? What can we do? I'm back to you, Chike. In 2 minutes, what can we do?
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. I'll go short, medium, and long term. The short-term solution is to ensure that crude is supplied in Naira to the refiners. Yeah, because like I said, that cost of sales is a significant, burden. Yeah, on these refiners. A lot of this equipment is not manufactured in country, and it's paid for in dollars. And if you have to then, during your operational phase, be paying for crude in dollars, that's a big burden. So that's number one, that's short term. Medium term to long term is, what we discussed apart in terms of logistics infrastructure. Trucking is not the way to distribute these petroleum products. There has to be a significant infrastructure investment, whether through midstream, downstream infrastructure funding, to put back the network of pipelines for petroleum products to be distributed across the country to, tank farms will be where you store them if you want to distribute to remote areas, but these things can be piped. I think there was a role PPMC had at that time, and that has to be reintroduced. Now, how long that will take to do is why I say it's medium to long term, but it's critical that that is done. Last but not the least, and this is one of the things that Walter Smith was strategically interested in, is manufacturing some of these heavy equipment required in the refineries locally. Okay, and that's why I continue to encourage that these refineries are anchor tenants into a major industrial park, which will bring in manufacturers that can make this crude distillation unit, these preheater systems, the valves, all the equipment. Because if those things are manufactured locally, you can see the impact of the Nigerian Content Development Monitoring Board and the strategy to reduce prices. Those things are manufactured locally, First of all, it will create, of course, massive employment opportunities, but it will significantly bring down the cost, the capital cost of putting the refineries in place, and therefore, have an impact on the final pricing of petroleum products. So that's short, medium to long, and long term. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you very much. Yes. And I will take me to the final round. I call it political economy and reform sustainability. I'm not going to deceive you. No. Because downstream reform is as much political as it is economics. Economics is the study of how choices are made to maximize defined objectives, putting into consideration all the constraints. And one of the constraints is election cycle. My friend, regulator, how do you insulate policy from vested interest? How do you insulate policy from vested interest?
Okay, Prof, that's a very unfair question, but it's okay.
And when I say you,
okay,
I don't mean Agbaje, but yes. I mean regulators.
Yes, sir. So
how do
they? First of all, it's important that a regulator must be apolitical, and not just apolitical, must be highly professional in what it does at any point in time, and it must be backed by full-scale competency. So, first of all, that is a given. That must be a basic that should exist. Secondly, any regulator that is actually worth its salt should have a long-term vision at any point in time of where it is headed, what its direction is. And I think that's one thing you can say clearly about the authority presently. Clear vision with clearly set goals. And more of this will be coming out in the days ahead with our project Nexus. So clearly we have a direction, you have a focus, and it is clear where you belong. For instance, we talked about imports. So today, if you want to come to NMDPRA to apply for import license for a particular product, for instance, the facts are clear before you. You yourself can see if this is what the authority will likely issue or not, because we have put all of the things out there in the public domain. So when you have all of that, then you have a kind of credibility. So it is that credibility that insulates you at the time you need to take very serious decisions that can have political interpretation. So as much as possible, we know that, especially when it comes to that downstream and pricing, there are sensitivities all over the place, and you cannot rule it out. But the regulator must not take the place of the politician as much as possible. Decisions must be taken purely based on facts as it presents itself and policy as outlined.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. We are going to go for the last round, so you'll be the last person to speak. I'm going to go back again, but this is the question in this round for you, Joe. Are we all right? Or you're on your WhatsApp with your friends? Joe, you were one of those involved in writing the petroleum policy document of 2017, from where the Petroleum Industry Governance Bill came and went, but then the PIB 2020 derived quite a lot from that petroleum policy document, and of course the PIA. Looking at what you have known in your days in the Ministry of Petroleum Resources as a policy advisor, what governance reforms are critical to sustain credibility and investment trust? Because it's about policy credibility, regulatory sustainability, and consumer responsibility.
Okay, I will start from, so the framework is there. The PIA provides a fairly decent regulatory framework.
Yes.
Okay. So the regulatory entities are in place. They are new, relatively. And like we say, like my Oga here did highlight, capacity is key. So for them to have the confidence and trust of both the investor and market players, they must exhibit a very high level of professionalism and capacity. They've done well relatively if you think about how long they've been in place in building capacity, but there's still a lot of work to be done. The interferences, I think we all struggled with how we might shield them from political interference. And we see today that those efforts might not have been sufficient. I remember we debated extensively on tenure protection and all of those issues, right? My sense today is that looking back 4 years, I don't think we did a great job of protecting them from those interferences. However, I believe that the legislative framework is not cast in stone. So we should learn from what's working now, and hopefully in not too distant time, amendments will be made to the legislation to give them more independence, because at the heart of all of this is regulatory independence. If we can't give the regulators independence, the investment community will not take us serious. So I think that it's a combination of capacity building and then the system being put at a pedestal where the regulators feel very safe and can take independent professional decisions. I think that is very, very key. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joe. Listen, I wouldn't say the PIA didn't anticipate. I think the problem that we see with respect to the downstream sector, and if I don't say, people probably will say, Prof, you chicken out. We do not at the moment, if I'm going to respond to what, we don't have a driver on the seat that will have implemented the PIA to insulate the professionals from politics. First, the board of directors of the authority was created as a buffer between professionals and political appointees. But that board did not sit. Second, in the implementation process of the PIA, if I were an advisor to President Buhari, the day the PIA became the law, I will have stepped aside and have a driver on the seat. We didn't. So some of the problem that we have today has to do with those parts of the PIA that were not implemented. I have about 5 minutes. No partiality in everyone, because I expected to have seen him on the podium. So I have 5 minutes. Chike, is there already?
Is there already?
Oh, my glasses is blood. All right, let me have one minute for my people, because I have a closing question for them. Across all perspectives, what is the most single critical action? Just give me one, each of you. Policy, investment, or institutional that must occur within the next 24 months to ensure Nigeria's downstream transition delivers efficiency, equity, and energy security. 1 minute. I'm going to read it again. Across all perspectives, what is the single most critical action? Policy, investment, or institutional that must occur within the next 24 months to ensure Nigeria's petroleum downstream transition delivers efficiency, equity, and energy security? GK, 1 minute, please. Just one.
Thank you very much, Prof. I will lay this out in the regulatory space. There's been quite a lot that is happening with the midstream and downstream regulatory authority. And you did mention that they should have a board inaugurated and in place that protects the technocrats, and there are many of them, very, very good people. Yes. I've had the pleasure of working through the approval processes with them, and they are business enablers. I can say this over and over again. But they need to be protected from any kind of political, how do I put it, intrusions into their processes. Once the regulator has the confidence that they are independent of those political influences, I think with the technocrats that I know that are there, they will push this Nigerian midstream and downstream, where investments and business to, I think the sky is their limit. So if you ask me what should be done within the next 24 hours,
24 months, yes.
24 hours, 24 months. It's to find a structure that establishes that independence of the regulator and empowers the regulator to follow through on the execution of the PIA. It's that simple.
Thank you. Ogami.
Okay, so I will just say straight away. So these last few months, I've showed out what the power of CNG, EV, electric vehicles, and CNG, gas-powered vehicles, the potential it has to absorb a lot of shock. We don't know when all of these kind of things will come up again, but we are sure that it will always come up, from time to time in the world we are in today. So over the next 6 to 9 months to 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, we should see massive deepened investments and penetration for CNG vehicles, gas vehicles, electric vehicles, so that at any point in time we're able to absorb some shocks that come from direct fossils. That would be what I want to see.
Joe, the next 24 months, one critical thing that you want to happen?
I would say policy clarity. There's just too much uncertainty in this space. And it has to do with poor implementation of the PIA. It's been implemented haphazardly. I would like to see that cleaned up. The investment committee, if you look at the way the PIA is designed, right, we've practically thrown out everything. We've given, in terms of the fiscal competitiveness, right, the provisions are there. There's enough incentive, fiscal incentive for investors to come. The only bottleneck is the way the policy and regulatory institutions have been handled. For instance, on the policy side, I don't know who is driving policy in the sector. Is it the Minister of State? Is it the President? Or is it the Special Advisor? So these are important elements. People need to see clearly. There has to be certainty in that space that this is where we are going and there will be no reversals. So that's very key.
Thank you very much. Let's just applaud them to appreciate what they've done. And Richmond, thank you. If there is anything I want to see in the next 24 months, personally, I want to drive on the seat for the oil and gas sector. The problem of Nigeria, oil and gas sector, is not geology, it is governance. And it needs a driver on the seat. That driver is someone that the National Assembly can call to order if misbehaved. We don't have anyone at this moment. Just my opinion. Thank you again.
Thank you very much. President, if you can please step forward and present their plaques to them. Thank you, thank you. Can we have the plaque?
Thank you, Chike.
Can I have the plaque?
Thank you, Prof.
Okay, Chike, if you can put me on a first-class ticket to Netherlands, I can bring your plaque to you this night and come back tomorrow morning for the session.
Richmond, you know how to reach me.